Yeah, huge blessing. It was total luck. I was like, oh my gosh, they made a mistake. Yes, I got through. Yeah. So I was born in Korea, came to the US when I was 2, and my father was an entrepreneur, had his own business, but unfortunately, due to the 2008 downturn, it actually left my family in a really financial hardship. And so since then, I grew up in a low income household, and my parents were just trying to figure it out. And being a first gen, student and not having any family members here in the US, you can imagine it's incredibly tough to navigate. Hey, like, what is this whole FAFSA process? What is this whole college graduation thing? What does that look like? Um, and so, you know, fortunately, my parents kept me and my brother on the right track. I was able to attend Babson College, which is a business school in the Northeast. And that was the first time I've been surrounded. Well, first time I went further east in Arizona, which is actually crazy. um, and the second thing that was crazy to me was I was surrounded by people that were just dreaming of, hey, you know what? I can't wait to be the next CEO of, this big company. Hey, I can't wait to start my next big company and become the next billion-dollar company,
Mhm.
right? And so, fortunately, throughout my college career, I was surrounded by great mentors, great organizations, and I was actually the first intern at Google from my alma mater.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, huge blessing. It was total luck. I was like, oh my gosh, they made a mistake. Yes, I got through. um, and then fast forward that after graduation in 2017, I started off my career as an analyst. 8 months later, was then promoted, which actually broke the fastest promotion record in the organization's history to becoming
Wow.
a strategist. Yeah, it's crazy. Another super lucky. And then 6 months after that, strategy and operations manager. A year after that, I'm carrying my current role today as a senior strategy and operations manager. And so that is my current full-time job. Wonsulting comes into the picture because my buddy Jonathan, who actually is the guy who started Wonsulting, he and I have been working together for the past 2 years, and we've been just doing a lot of workshops with colleges across the world, right? To date, I think we've done about 80 in the past year and a half. We've actually done 4 this week, which is crazy.
Wow.
Um, and and what's insane is that, at the beginning of last year, back in 2019, Jonathan was like, you know what, I'm going to just formalize what we're doing here as Wonsulting. And then I was brought on to kind of scale the business earlier this year in January. And so that's really how Wonsulting got started, because we saw a huge gap of opportunities that were kind of given to the Harvards of the world,
Mhm.
to the students that went to, the small colleges like Babson, right? And we were thinking about how do we then equal the playing field for every high performing student out there, because everyone deserves a chance to work at a Facebook, a GE, or maybe even, a Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that I found very interesting when I would, participate in recruiting when I worked at GE. And sometimes they would say, if they were looking for a certain demographic, or if they were trying to say, hey, you know what, how the pipeline isn't there. And one of the things that I would challenge and say is maybe we aren't going where the pipeline exists. Because I was like, we have a select few schools that we look at. But I'm like, there's a lot of people out in the equation that we're not giving a shot that I think would be great here. So I think that's something that's very, very big what you guys are doing.
Yeah. And I love what you said about that, because, finding where the talent is, I think, is the hardest part for companies, right? They only have a limited number of recruiters and limited number of resources. So then the question that they're thinking about is, how do I find the most talented people as quickly as possible? So it's actually in their best interest to go to 3 schools that all their execs tell them to go to, because they want to appease the execs. They want to be able to get as many students as possible through the recruiting process. But the question is if there was a platform, if there was a way for recruiters to get the top 1% from 50 schools or 100 schools versus getting the top 30% across 3 schools, would they take that opportunity? our hypothesis is yes, they absolutely would. It's just that it's too costly for them to do that today. That's the long-term vision of Wonsulting.
Okay, okay. So we mentioned about the workshops that you guys do. What have been some of those workshops, and what has the experience with those workshops been like?
Yeah. So traditionally, so the number one thing we want to make sure that we don't do is we want to make sure we don't overlap with what the career center does or what they'll learn in school. Chances are you don't need another, two guys who just kind of here just telling you the same thing that the career development people will want to do, or will teach you to do. And so the thing that we do and we specialize in is we specialize in, okay, we have this new era of recruiting where everything is now digital on this platform called LinkedIn, right? What does that mean for you? What does the future look like? And what can you do today to make those opportunities for yourself tomorrow and a year down the line? That's what we teach.
Okay. No, I've seen some of your the webinars, or I guess the live Zooms that you guys have done on LinkedIn. Like, where did that start to come into play for you guys' strategy?
Yeah, honestly, it was just to allow people whom we thought had really valuable insight to share, and we just want to share it with the people in our networks, right? And it just started off as, hey, we got a recruiter on one time, and we had some of our friends who we thought were really into the recruiting scene to join on, and then eventually kind of just grew into this thing where now like yesterday we had 13,000 people join across a 3-hour event. We had the SVP from Cisco. We had the global head of internships from Microsoft. We had the head of program design from Google. We had interns from all the big tech companies. We had recruiters from like Airbnb, Robinhood,
Wow.
crazy. And it all started because we were like, you know what? We see people in our network who are just doing great things. We want to give them an opportunity to, basically give them a microphone and say, hey, like, just do what you keep doing, and let's just have an open conversation. And I think to date, maybe we've done about 10 of these so far, or maybe like 11.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that makes it, I mean, I think that's what makes what Wonsulting is doing a bit special because, you don't really see that a lot of times where, the people that are in the companies where they may not be the spokesperson for the company, or they may not be the CEO of a company, but there are tons of people within the company that have their own story that a lot of people can just learn and grow from that story that they have. And even as I was tuning in to, I believe it was someone from Microsoft was just telling kind of their background, kind of their story. And, it's surprising how much, we're encouraged or how much we grow from somebody else's story. So, I mean, I think that what you guys are doing is very special, and definitely keep it up.
Thank you. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do again is just provide those same opportunities that everyone else has at those, top elite schools to just everybody else, right? And the more that we can do that, the more that we're accomplishing our mission. So I really appreciate the kind words.
No problem. Yeah. One of the things that I did, couple of questions that I saw in one of the recent videos that I wanted to get you to talk about a little bit more is this big question about how do I get my foot in the door? Because I
Yes.
thought you guys had some great insight on that one. So,
Yeah.
I mean, as people are thinking about, hey, I'm not at a big school. I'm not at like one of the top 3 schools that are on the recruiting list. So it's like, how do I get my foot in the door?
The McKinseys, the Goldmans, the Facebooks, they'll all go to Harvard's campus, but they'll never come to Babson's, right? And so the way to think about getting your foot in the door is, well, how do I make up that differential and the opportunity gap? It's through LinkedIn. The reason why LinkedIn is a tool and platform to do that is because I think they have like 700 million users today, and every professional has a LinkedIn profile, and so that gives you an opportunity to seek those people yourselves. Because chances are recruiting is a function of, hey, how many people can I talk to versus how many people can I actually get through the door. From the hiring manager side, they're thinking, how can I get the best possible student, best possible person as soon as possible? They're thinking, okay, well, should I choose from the people that I know of, Or should I just look through this pile of 10,000 resumes that got submitted through the job portal? Chances are they'll probably go through the first pile. Then the question is, how do you get to that list of people that they think of when they think of, oh, I'm hiring for a marketing analyst? Who comes to mind, right? It's networking, figuring out how to get people inside the company to vouch for you. And again, the key thing here is that people try to play the short game, saying, hey, I'm going to network so I can get an internship tomorrow. It doesn't really work like that. Relationships are nurtured. They're I like to compare them to flowers, right? Every relationship is like a flower. You can have a cactus, you can have a rose. One requires significantly more care, where a rose you might have to put in certain humidity, certain temperatures, water a lot more. But on the other hand, cactuses maybe need to be watered once every 3 months, right? Every relationship is like that. But in both cases, if you never water any of them or give them any care, then they're just not going to grow. Right. And so for you to sow the fruits of your labor, you need to care for these relationships and nurture them like you would for flowers. So the key thing is, one, get on LinkedIn. Two, reach out to people where you ultimately want to end up in, right? And genuinely nurture those relationships. Three, just reap the rewards.
And I think that is that's something that a salesperson once told me as I was asking them about, doing some sales projection, because I mean, I'm a finance and accounting person. So I was working for a company, trying to forecast, and we're asking about sales projections. And I was sitting in the room and I heard a non-salesperson just kind of throw this out like, oh, well, we need to increase sales by like 10% or whatever. And the salesperson was like, well, we got to check the pipeline to see, what we have in the pipeline, and the non-salesperson was just like, why can't we just go out and do it? And it's one of those things that taught me, like I said, that uniqueness of, well, the relationship to close that deal is going to take time. And like I said, if we haven't been nurturing that relationship, we haven't earned the right to ask for the sale yet. And especially when you're doing something big, like, in a career standpoint, where you're asking someone to take a chance on you, to hire you, that you're going to do a great job, to where it's just like, it definitely helps when you've nurtured that relationship.
On the one hand, you have someone who's very much, hey, give me something, right? On the other hand, someone saying, hey, teach me something, right?
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
most people, if we had this face-to-face interaction, everyone would be on the side of, hey, teach me something, rather than, hey, Terrell, give me a job. Right? And so it's the funniest thing, because it feels like the screen allows us to forget that another person is on the opposite side, which I think is one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they use LinkedIn.
No, I definitely think that makes sense. 'Cause I was telling someone about, it's like, it's very amazing, like the number of sales pitches that I get in my inbox on LinkedIn. To
Yeah.
where at times when I look at the message, I'm like, this person, and sometimes they're like big ticket items where they're asking me to spend 10 grand on something. I'm like, I don't even know who you are.
Oh my god, it's almost like this is the next generation of like door-to-door sales, you know what I mean?
Gotcha. So that helps us understand, like I said, that getting your foot in the door. Now, another big thing that I think, and this is something I think it impacts people who are new to the career profession as well as people who are seasoned, is how do you make the right impression when you're on LinkedIn? Because, kind of from the old school method of, you could read people's body language and you did it all in person. But now when you're online, it's just making that first impression, because a lot of times when you're reaching out to someone, they'll either look at your profile or view it. It's just like, so what is some of the advice you give about being able to make that lasting and valuable impression through LinkedIn or other social sites?
The way to make a lasting impression is just to nurture that relationship. And again, I hate to sound like, squeaky wheel, but it's one of those things that no one does. And it sounds so simple, but people might be thinking, oh my gosh, like Jerry, like, don't you have anything else to provide? But to give people some perspective here. So out of the 80 workshops that Jonathan and I have done, we've probably spoken to 15,000 students in person. And on LinkedIn, our content has probably gone over 10 million impressions in the past year. So we just get a large number of messages and interact with a bunch of students. I actually did this challenge on LinkedIn where I challenged professionals to open up their calendars so that people can learn. I've done that 3 times in my career, and I've spoken to over 300 students through that. The out of all the students that I've met, out of all the professionals that I've interacted with, I can probably recall 2 names that come to mind as I think back on this whole journey.
Wow.
The reason why is because no one follows up. And maybe it's just because of me. Maybe I'm just not a guy you want to follow up with. I completely get that. Maybe 1 out of the 100 will continuously follow up. That one student who continually follows up and gets mentored by that professional is the person that when the professional goes, oh man, I need to hire an analyst, you know, Jerry is the guy I want to hire because he has been expressing interest to me. He has shown so much character development. I don't need to look at this pile of 100 resumes, right? And that is the number one way to really just think about making that lasting impression. And yes, we can talk about, hey, like how do you craft a beautiful message to get your foot in the door and all that thing, but really it's following up is the most important aspect that you can do in your LinkedIn career to set these opportunities up for yourself for 6 months down the line, year down the line, 5 years down the line.
No, that I think I've been on the receiving side of that, like even in like prior companies where I've been a hiring manager, and there was before I left the last company I was at, there was a person that I hired. He actually reached out to me, probably in like, let's say it was probably like February of like 2019. I ended up hiring him January of 2020, because he had reached out. I mean, when he had reached out, I really didn't have any opportunities that were open at the time. But like I said, he reached out, let me know, had some questions about, first, he wasn't really reaching out to say, hey, can you hire me? He was reaching out, he was saying, hey, I would like to work for a tech company, or at least I believe that I would like to work for a tech company. Can you give me some insight on what it's like working there? And so it's like I was helping him kind of navigate the steps in his journey. And after 2 conversations, he was like, based on what I hear, I'd be really interested. If you guys have any openings down the line, let me know. So it's like later on down the line, when I knew that I was going to have some job openings, like I actually reached back out to him and was like, hey, I'm not making any promises, but hey, here's an opportunity that aligns to what you talked about before. So it's like I made sure he was aware of the opportunity, and we went through the interview process. I mean, we did a lot of team interviews, so the rest of the team really liked him, and I mean, he was a really good fit. And I think that made a big difference for him, is where even before the job became available, he reached out and started, like I said, nurturing that relationship. And like I said, I'm not saying that it'll take everybody a year to do it, but for him, like I said, it worked in his favor.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that when you talk to any mid-level senior executive, you'll ask, "How did you get in your career?" Right? 90% of the time, they won't say, "Hey, I went onto the job board, applied for VP of service, and I got my job." At a certain point, when you begin to realize in your career, the recruiting cycle no longer becomes click and apply. Rather, it becomes, who do you know? Can they vouch for your work? And when those opportunities come up, are you going to be the first person that they think of?
Yeah.
Right. And that's, if you can take a lesson from that, the lesson there is the relationships matter the most in recruiting, right? Because once it comes, and one of my mentors told me this, is the best time to recruit is when you're not looking for a job, right? Because then you can be so picky. You can be, you know what? Hey, I want you to give me a 30% increase in my salary. Otherwise, I won't even look at you, right? And be in that driver's seat is the most optimal position you want to be in, because then at that point you can make all the demands and feel good if you say, actually, all right, maybe let's talk in a year or two, right?
Hmm.
And so I really resonate with that, especially just focusing on the message of network, nurture the relationships, to let it grow.
Oh. Now, do you find that because there's so much attention on the tech industry and the big tech companies, do you find that many of the students are all focused on tech, or do you feel like they're missing out on non-tech opportunities?
It's a great question. I think the word tech has kind of become a buzzword today, because on one hand, if you ask a group of computer engineers, they'll say, tech means to me, anything technical like data science roles, software
Hmm.
engineering, product managers. But on the other hand, if you talk to business students or non-technical folks, when you say tech, they'll say, oh, I want to work for the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks of the world. Majority of the people that I've spoken to fall in the latter, where they actually aren't technical and they do want to work in a tech company. Um, that being said, I think it's just natural, just given the amount of impact that these tech companies are having, that it's very natural for a student to say, well, I want to be able to make that type of impact early in my career, so that then I can showcase that to people later down in my career. I think that's completely reasonable. I think one thing that people often don't think about as much is they don't think about culture, they don't think about fit, they don't think about all the softer side of things. They just think of the name, impact, and just run towards that path. Um, I have an anecdote of a friend whom I interned with, and he didn't really like his internship at Google. And when we converted full time, he quit after 6 months.
Wow.
And for most people, they'll go, "Well, why would you quit Google?" Right? And for him, he just didn't like his job, right? And for most people, they might look at him and go, "Oh my gosh, you're crazy." But the reality is, regardless of kind of what you might see on movies or TVs, um, working at a tech company is a job, right? You're going to spend 40, 50, 60 hours doing the work that you would be doing in another company. And so you really have to make sure that you prioritize you over the company, at all times, and making sure that you're making the right decision for yourself.
So, how do you find ways of understanding what that culture is like before, like people get in the door? Because I think people are, oftentimes mesmerized by the name of the organization, that they don't take the time to step back and say, "All right, let me take a sober look at this opportunity and see, is it a good fit?" So, what kind of advice do you give people on, hey, this is how you can start to understand what that culture is before you make that jump?
You would talk to people in that company or industry to say, hey, well, first, how what do you like about the culture? What don't you like about the culture? How would you describe that to me? But more importantly, the more people you talk to in that company or team, the more you begin to realize that you'll begin to see patterns of the kind of people. Do they only hire extroverts? Are they all introverted? Or do they only what are their like favorite activities? And so it's really just doing your homework, and you do your homework by just talking to people, which ultimately comes back to networking. I promise I'll have different answers than networking throughout this entire call. um, but it's talking to people, making sure that you ask the questions that really get you curious, and making sure you use that information to make the decision that's best for you.
Awesome. So I definitely, like I said, thank you for hopping on the interview. But before we wrap things up, I do want to ask you, how can people that are listening follow, other videos, other content, other material that Wonsulting, like where can they find you guys?
Yeah. So you can find us on wonsulting.com. We have everything kind of listed out there. But if you want to engage with us, LinkedIn is the best opportunity. Network with me. Send me a personalized invite. Um, and you can just search up Jerry Lee Google on LinkedIn. I'm probably going to be one of the first ones on there.
Hey, definitely thank you so much for being on the Business Talk Library, and all the best to you and the Wonsulting team. Like I said, continue the great work you guys are doing, because I think there are a lot of people who are benefiting and growing from what you guys have to offer.